obviously, Mark Carney being coronated in as now the interim prime minister, the prime minister to be the kind of replacement for Justin Trudeau. What is the intentions of having Mark Carney as prime minister? Because obviously, this guy that just came out of nowhere is a deep globalist that has a lot of connections with Brookfield and the WEF. Obviously, there has to be some intention of why they selected this guy to become the prime minister. Well, interesting enough, this is from The Independent. This is from a couple days ago, before Mark Carney won, I use the term loosely, the Liberal leadership election. So this is from last Wednesday. Mark Carney failed to stop Brexit, but hopes to save Canada from populism. The former governor of Bank of England is a frontrunner to replace Justin Trudeau as Canadian Prime Minister. So, nothing says effective democracy and strong leadership than a scumbag from the global elites with an iron fist who's trying to protect you from you. Because that's what populism is. Populism is the general public, what the general public decides. Populism is democracy. And what they're saying here is that Mark Carney got chosen in by the liberal establishment to replace Justin Trudeau, being just another face of Justin Trudeau, a more confident, less blackface Justin Trudeau, to do the exact same thing, to undermine democracy, to undermine the Canadian population, trying to save you from populism. Which, again, just like conspiracy, just like when they say, 9/11 truther, those are terms used by the intelligence communities to undermine the actual greatness of people. When they call you a conspiracy theorist, that's to undermine people that are actually questioning real critical things and uncovering the truth. Or when they question about 9/11, they call them 9/11 truthers. I didn't realize truther was such a bad word. Same with populism. Populism is not a bad word, but they want you to believe that's a bad word because the intelligence community, the mainstream media, uses it in a context that's supposed to undermine the ideas of populism. So this guy, Dan Knight, who is an independent journalist, he writes for a Substack called The Opposition. I highly recommend people check it out. He does some good, credible work. He wrote this really long tweet here, but I want to show it because he's spot on about this. He says, well, it didn't take that long. Just days into his coronation as the new Liberal leader, Mark Carney is already getting absolutely dismantled, and Pierre Poilievre is leading the charge. At his latest press conference, Poilievre did not hold back. He exposed Carney as a Liberal insider, a corporate sellout, and the perfect embodiment of the cronyism and elitism that has defined Trudeau's government. But let's be honest, Carney isn't even pretending to be different. And what's his first move? Running from his record and screaming about Donald Trump. Because that's all they got. This entire Liberal strategy is a joke. They can't run on their actual record because their record is a disaster. 9 years of failure, and what do they want you thinking about? Trump. And that is why people like Mark Carney, that's why Doug Ford, that's why so many of these politicians are almost gleeful at this current tariff war. They pretend to be angry. They pretend to shake their fist and be angry at someone like Donald Trump. But they're actually gleeful. Because every time there is an attack from Trump on new tariffs, or they're increasing the tariffs on aluminum steel, it's actually helping them. It's helping the politicians because now they can lie to you. They can gaslight you and manipulate you to think that they're going to act tough around this and not tell you the truth of why these tariffs even exist. Pierre Poilievre tore Carney apart at his press conference, and it wasn't even hard. He pointed out the blindly obvious hypocrisy that the media refuses to touch. Carney wants you to believe he's the guy who will stand up to Trump. But what he did do when Trump put tariffs on Canada, he caved. He moved Brookfield's headquarters from Canada to New York 6 days later. So when Trump put tariffs on the first time in his first administration, Mark Carney, who had offices in Toronto, who for years was telling Justin Trudeau and coordinating with him during the economic crisis in Canada here, which doubled the failure. It made it even worse. He sent his offices to the United States. And I want to ask Mark Carney, if he moved his office to the United States, I wonder how much carbon taxes he'd be paying for. If he's Mr. Environment and cares so much that we have to spend our tax dollars to clean up the planet, to clean up the environment, if you're sending your company to the United States, are you paying carbon taxes then? Probably not. And probably the ultimate reason why he moved. Why he moved to the United States and lied directly at you. Then when he got called out on it, he lied. Poilievre said directly, we got in writing and we proved it. So let's get this straight. The Liberals are running against Trump, but their guy is the one who did exactly what Trump wanted him to do. That's the defense. That's their big hero. It gets better. Carney won't disclose his assets. The media naturally won't ask why, but Poilievre will. And here's the reality. Carney has millions of dollars in financial holdings that directly conflict with Canada's natural interests. He backed carbon taxes in Canada while investing in American coal. He opposed pipelines in Canada while his company bought Middle East pipelines. He spent years making himself richer while Canadians got poorer. But he's the guy who's going to fix things now. And that's why people that are bludging over the mainstream media and soaking up to their television screens don't know anything about this and consider him an outsider. That's why they believe his lies. That's why Canadians cheer him on. Because they don't hear any of this. They never heard a word about this. I literally had a conversation with my neighbor the other day as news was breaking about Mark Carney being sworn in as the interim prime minister. And I mentioned about, well, don't you think it's kind of interesting that this guy came out of nowhere? He has, business dealings with Brookfield. He's got a lot of corruption on his hand. I mentioned that, and my neighbor turned around and said, what's Brookfield? They had no idea. They had no idea about this guy. But they saw the TV screen. They listened to CBC or Global or CTV that were applauding him and saying, yeah, he's different. Oh, yeah, he's standing up towards Trump. Trump is the awful one, and that's what we need right now. They have no idea who this guy is. And they don't want you to know who this guy is. The Liberals use every loophole to avoid accountability, and Carney isn't even trying to pretend otherwise. He doesn't even have to disclose his assets. He doesn't have to explain why he moved jobs to the United States. He doesn't even have to take responsibility for advising Trudeau through the years of the economic collapse, which again, he made it worse. He was the governor of the Bank of England, and he almost collapsed the entire British economy. And this is the guy that's supposed to save us. Save us from tariffs. Save us from Trump. Save us from the current disparity that's wrecking this country. That's what's so laughable about this. That's what's so insane. It's idiocracy out in the open. But if Poilievre so much as drinks a Coke Zero, the media will cover it like Watergate. That's how this works. Well, I think the most angry person pointing Poilievre to a Coke Zero probably be RFK Jr. And that Coke's not really healthy. Don't you know about the aspartame? Aspartame is not really good for the human body. I'm working a bit on my RFK impression there. I hope it works. And here's the part that they really don't want to talk about. This election isn't about Trump. That's a distraction. This election is about Canada. It's about housing costs doubling. It's about inflation crushing families. It's about food prices skyrocketing while China slaps tariffs on Canadian agriculture and Carney says nothing. The Liberals don't want you thinking about that. They need this to be about some imaginary far-right apocalypse instead of the actual crisis they created. So that exactly the point there. That while everyone's so focused on Donald Trump and the tariffs and seeing all these politicians going on mainstream media shaking their fists and say, oh, we're going to get you back, Sonny. They're leaving out all this vital information that's destroying the Canadian economy to begin with. The tariffs aren't destroying the economy. We're destroying it ourselves. The mass inflation, the cost of living, the housing crisis, the fact that we're still sending billions of dollars out to Ukraine, a war that's going to have a peace deal that's hopefully going to end, and Canada still wants to send money over there to continue on the war. None of that gets addressed. None of it. And right now, we're midway through March, coming up into April 1st, they're going to increase the carbon taxes. The MPs are going to get a huge bonus. They're gonna get an increase in their finances, and it's just going to be a disaster. And then April 2nd is going to be the tariff. So we're screwing ourselves 9 ways to Sunday. And the mainstream media does not pay a word, does not mention a word about this. All you have called it what it is. Canadians have a choice in the next election. Do they want to give the Liberals a fourth term in power after they drove up housing costs, food prices, and taxes, blocked resource projects, and made us more reliant on Trump's America? That's the real question. Not Trump, not whether distraction the media is pushing this week. The question is whether Canadians are willing to endure another 4 years of the same people who broke this country. And what's kind of surprising about this, and just to mention this again, right now, all the media attention is trying to point at Pierre Poilievre for sounding like Trump, that he's caving towards Trump, that Poilievre is just another form of the Trump mega movement. Chrystia Freeland went on to Bill Maher's show and said, oh, Pierre Poilievre is like the maple syrup mega. Well, what's actually happening is because of Trump, because of these tariffs, it's not actually helping much Pierre Poilievre, it's helping the Liberals. Trump's actually helping more the Liberals than they are helping Pierre Poilievre. They don't want to mention that. They don't want to mention that because then it points them as being more subservient to Trump. Is that kind of interesting? It helps more of the Liberal Party because now they're getting more attention and they're gaining more in the polls, where Pierre Poilievre, before the tariffs, before this craziness, was leading the charge. Pierre Poilievre was top of the top, and that's why the Liberal Party, the NDP, and the Green Party are all coordinating together to try to prevent an election. They're trying to pull a Romania right now. They're all trying to coordinate to say that, hey, the tariffs are affecting us, and because of that, it's an emergency crisis, and we can't have an election. That's what Karina Gold said. That's what Chrystia Freeland said. That's what drunk as a skunk Elizabeth May is saying. That's what members within these parties are stating. That, hey, depending on how these tariffs go, we might not be able to have an election. So they're trying to pull a loophole to remain themselves in power. They're the ones that are corrupting democracy. They're the ones that are destroying Canada, not Trump. Everyone likes to point at Trump and say, oh my God, he's wrecking Canadian sovereignty. No, our own politicians are already doing that. Our own politicians have been doing that for years, way before Trump. And finally, some people are catching up. But there's still a lot that aren't. Because there's still a lot that are glued to their TV screens and being told the exact opposite. They're not being told vital information. They're not being told who Mark Carney is deliberately to keep this guy afloat. So he goes on, Mark Carney is Trudeau 2.0. Same elitism, same arrogance, same contempt for working Canadians. And the worst part, he's not even pretending to be different because he doesn't have to. The Liberals are betting that Canadians are too stupid to see what's happening. They'll hear Trump and panic into voting Liberal again. That no one will notice Carney's business ties, his financial conflicts, his blatant hypocrisy. But here's the problem. Canadians aren't buying it. Poilievre called out every one of Carney's lies, and he's right. The Liberals are out of excuses, they're out of distractions, and no amount of media spin is going to change that. So the Liberal Party is screwed. The Liberal Party is cooked. And that's why they're coordinating with the other left-wing parties to try to forcefully cancel the elections, to try to make excuses, make a legal loophole to prevent Pierre Poilievre, who is still in the lead, who still has a shot at a conservative majority. They want to eliminate that. They want to try to restrict Pierre Poilievre from getting that majority. So this is what Pierre Poilievre said in the public address here, and he's just laying it out. And again, I'm not 100% on board with Pierre Poilievre. We know that there's certain things that we criticize about Pierre Poilievre. He's no different really than the other establishment. He's very much pro-Ukraine, pro-Israel. He's a Zionist. There's a lot of things we can point out about this. But when it comes to economics, when it comes to pointing out the utmost hypocrisy of the current establishment, he knows how to nail it. And here's an example of it.
The Liberal establishment has installed Justin Trudeau's economic advisor as the next Liberal leader to trick Canadians into giving Liberals a fourth term in power. But he's just like Justin, and he's more of the same. We have the same Liberal MPs, the same Liberal advisors, the same Liberal promises, who will produce the same Liberal results. Doubling housing costs, doubling the debt, doubling lineups at food banks, enriching the global elites at the expense of the working class, and making our economy more helpless and reliant on the Americans than ever before. Now, Mark Carney is trying to hide from his record over the last 5 years of advising Trudeau in favor of raising carbon taxes, money printing inflation, and blocking resource projects, all while he moved his company headquarters and jobs to the United States. You know, it's ironic. Mr. Carney is trying to distract from his many scandals and conflicts of interest, as well as his disastrous record as Justin Trudeau's economic advisor, by talking about Trump. He's the guy that sold out to Trump. 6 days after Donald Trump threatened Canada with tariffs to steal our jobs, Mark Carney announced to Brookfield shareholders that he would move his headquarters from Canada to New York. And when you asked him about it, he lied to your face. We got it in writing, and we proved it. He sold out Canada. He put his profit ahead of our people. And he did exactly what Donald Trump wanted. Never before have we had a prime minister so conflicted and compromised and yet so little scrutinized. Just like when he supported carbon taxes in Canada while investing in American coal. He opposed Canadian pipelines while his company bought Middle East pipelines. He has millions of dollars of financial interests that run against Canada's national interests. He gets rich, making Canadians poor. You can be sure about one thing. Donald Trump's going to have a briefing on his desk of all of Mark Carney's American investments. And he is going to leverage all of Carney's profit motive against the interest of the Canadian people. And we know Carney will sell out Canada for his personal profit. He's already done it. He's systematically done it his entire time as a corporate insider. Giving the Liberals a fourth term will not change any of that. Carney puts himself first. Conservatives will put Canada first. Putting Canada first means cutting bureaucracy and taxes. It means passing a big, beautiful, bring-it-home tax cut, lowering tax rates on work, investment, energy, and home building. It means axing the carbon tax for real, for good, for everyone, forever. It means repealing the Liberal No New Pipelines Law C-69 and instead granting rapid permission to our companies to build more pipelines, more natural gas exports, more data centers, mines, and other natural resources to bring home powerful paychecks and production to our people. We need an east-west pipeline, and we need to say it in both French and English. Nous avons besoin d'une pipeline d'un océan de l'ouest à l'est. Dans les deux langues officielles, il faut le dire, sans équivoque, pour briser.
Okay, so it goes on for a bit. This is like a 10-minute video. He does it in both English and French, but you get the gist of it. that Garrett Polyev is pointing out the obvious that majority of Canadians, I feel, have noticed at least, but are not willing to sink in. It hasn't sunk in to their full brain yet. In the fact that this is a man who came from all these higher up institutions that came out of the UK, that came out of the WEF, that came out of these uh, international conglomeracies that have nothing to do with Canada, hasn't been in the country for quite an extensive long time. We don't know really anything about him, not even his birth province where he came from. He says he's a Western Canadian, but we don't know what prairie province he came from. And just miraculously he became prime minister out of the blue. And we knew from covering the Liberal leadership race that they rigged the process of it. They rigged the process. They eliminated Ruby Dalla, who was the next after Mark Carney. She was strong second lead. And they eliminated her right before the debates because they were afraid that Ruby Dalla, being a kind of true original liberal, not this crazy neoliberal globalist that we have right now, but an actual original liberal, was going to challenge Mark Carney. And they were petrified about that, so they eliminated her. They came up with excuses of her financial backings and, oh, your donors are conflicting, so we got to eliminate you from the race. And yet they did not promise back a refund to the people that contributed to the Ruby Dalla campaign. It went right to Mark Carney. All the votes, everything went to Mark Carney. Everything. And there was over 400,000 registered Liberal members that were voting that election, but somehow they only qualified 150,000 to 400,000. I wonder why that is. Maybe could the rest of them be Ruby Dalla's votes that were automatically disqualified? They don't even tell you why. They don't even tell you why. And that is just the top of the list of so many others. It's a whole laundry list, ladies and gentlemen. It's just a tip of the iceberg of everything with Mark Carney. We haven't even gotten to the Ghislaine Maxwell connection, because we know that Mark Carney and his wife being have citizenship in Britain, and his wife is British, have deep connections with the Maxwell family. They grew up together. They knew each other, Ghislaine Maxwell and Robert Maxwell. You don't think they knew about the sex trafficking? They don't know about Jeffrey Epstein? They don't know about any of that? Just tip of the iceberg. And that's who we got as a prime minister, ladies and gentlemen. That's who we got. Not elected. We got. They're shoving it down our throats. And they're telling you that you have to go with this because of Trump. Trump. That's how they're manipulating you through the mainstream media, and hopefully thinking that you're so brain dead in front of your television screens that you're not going to question anything. You're not going to question who this guy is. Oh, he's a fighter against Trump. Yeah. Good for him. But here, government EXE is corrupt. Says Canadians got vaccinated from COVID because the TV said so. But the vaccines are very safe and effective. Let me just disclaim that. Canadians supported Ukraine because the TV said so. Canadians wanted to fight climate change with higher taxes because the TV said so. Canadians hate Donald Trump because the TV said so. Canadians are not mad at that Mark Carney was installed as prime minister because the TV hasn't said so. Because the TV never told you who this guy is. If you knew who this guy is, if you do a bare minimum research of who Mark Carney is, it would scare the living shit out of you. It should terrify you. It should get you riled up and angry. That's why when they did the elbows up protest in Ottawa, it was a stupid protest because it didn't engage in anything. What they should have been protesting is directing that anger to someone like Mark Carney. How the Liberal Party cheated and rigged their own party to install a globalist puppet to continue on the tyrannical Trudeau regime. Now we just got a more confident one with less blackface and isn't a drama school teacher. Maybe you won't cry on cue as often. I don't know. But it's the same thing. The exact same policy, exact same measures. So here's also another thing to add to this. And surprisingly, this is on Facebook, of all places. I thought Bill C-18, the Online News Act, would have restricted a post like this, but amazing this went through. So this is from a place called Canada Campaign, and this guy, Larry Brock, posted this. It says, Mark Carney's first move as Liberal leader. He hired Justin Trudeau's fired minister of misinformation, Mark Mencino, as his chief of staff. The guy who was responsible for misinformation, who got fired from Justin Trudeau's campaign, who got fired from Justin Trudeau's administration because he's a notorious liar. The guy responsible for misinformation, telling you what the truth is, got fired because he lied so much. And now he's being rehired back on through Mark Carney to be the chief of staff. Oh my God. So, Mark Mencino lied about transferring serial killer Paul Bernardo out of maximum security. He's still not in maximum security. He lied about that. He lied directly to the face of the public about a dangerous killer. He also lied about Beijing's police stations operating in Canada, denied they existed. They did. They did investigations. They proved that. Lied about the Emergencies Act and said police asked for it. They didn't. No, police were complied to do so. Police were told by the federal government that they had to comply. Just like how Doug Ford threatened the OPP stations and all the police stations in Ontario to crack down on people disobeying the lockdown measures. Oh, if anyone's outside taking a walk or getting fresh air, you got to crack their heads down. You got to arrest them. You got to deal with that. And every police station in Ontario said, no. Hell no. That's just stupid. That's just wasteful. We don't have the resources. And if we're too busy doing that, what about the actual criminals that are getting away with crimes? Marco lied so much, even Justin Trudeau had to fire him. A liar hiring a liar. More proof that Carney is just like Justin. And he links that to the National Post article that said, first reading, Marco Mencino's Canada's Minister of Misinformation. Here's all the times, just in the last few months, Mencino's been caught saying untrue things. The guy who's going to lecture you and be responsible for censorship because they don't want you to be misinformed. They don't want you to get wrong facts. But yet this guy is a notorious liar, is a serial liar, and has lied directly to the public numerous amount of times. And the guy that even Justin Trudeau fired him is getting rehired by Mark Carney. So here is now the new prime minister on Twitter here saying, today I met with the commissioner, Mike Duheme, to discuss the RCMP's ongoing work to keep our border strong and Canadians safe. National security and safety are crucial to Canada's success, and they will be fundamental focus of my government. Well, how come you never told Justin Trudeau and talked about that beforehand? Because that would have avoided a lot of these tariffs. But this is obviously a blatant lie. This is obviously a blatant lie because Mark Carney doesn't. He's part of the Open Borders Initiative. He's part of the Open Borders agenda. He wants the flooding of mass migrants because that's what the WEF wants. That's what Brookfield wants. That's what the corporate capture that's taken over Canadian politics wants. This is obviously a lie. And what this also shows is that the RCMP isn't going to be concerned about Mark Carney. That's why there hasn't been an investigation. That's why they haven't revealed a lot of documentation about who this guy really is. Now they just install him. Oh, okay, well, he's the prime minister. There's nothing we can do. And this is Mark Carney before announcing that he was going to take over the Liberal Party. This was back when he just got off the governor of Bank of England, and he was on a radio show in the UK here. And listen to just the intent of why this guy is in the political sphere, why he's in the position that he is, and what his true intent is. He's a total career climber, but he's also intentful for being a really deep elite globalist. That this guy has no initiative, no obligation to the people of Canada. That the reason this guy got sworn in is exactly what that independent article said. It's to prevent Canada from actually having a populist movement, from actually having a real established nation that helps one another, that unite together. So here's what he says.
I would say I see myself as part of the social movement. I think those at the vanguard of the social movement might see me as being farther behind. And I've, absolutely full credit, and I do in the book, to Greta Thunberg, who I've had the pleasure of meeting several times, and who absolutely has catalyzed that movement, the youth movement, and also done something incredibly valuable. And this is embarrassing to admit, but I think we should admit it.
Is it embarrassing that you have 3 different citizenships, that you're friends with Ghislaine Maxwell, and you just announced that you had the pleasure of meeting Greta Thunberg? Is it also kind of interesting that Greta Thunberg is no longer the center of attention? Yeah, you notice that? Greta Thunberg, who was the top tier, who everyone talked about. It was the reign of social media, the "how dare you" speech. Remember that? Remember, she was all over the place. They had documentaries about her. She went over to Davos. She went over to different countries. She rode a sailboat. She was deeply concerned about climate change and screaming at the top of her lungs, "How dare you!" And now we haven't heard a word since. Because now she is supporting pro-Palestine movements. She is an activist for being against the genocide. And now, because that is opposing what the globalists want and what the Zionists want, that are pretty much the same 2 peas in the pod, they cast her out. Which shows you that Greta Thunberg was nothing more than a psyop. Greta Thunberg was nothing more than a grifter for the globalists. Why else would they invite a child, a Swedish child, to Davos to lecture in front of the billionaire class? Why do you think they would allow that? Because she's such a great environmentalist, or because they can use her as a pawn? And now, because she's a grown adult, maybe she's educated a bit more and understands why, the globalists capture as it indulged into promoting genocide. She's against that. She's for the Palestinians. She's for free Palestine. Now they cast her aside. Now you don't see her anywhere. Anywhere. Isn't that kind of interesting?
And this is often true, by the way, in finance. Very obvious truths are not fully understood in the system. So what she hammered home was the carbon budget, how small it was, how rapidly it was being depleted. And we've moved in a few short years, in part because of her, from a world of ESG, sustainability, broader conversations around, as I say, sustainability, to a relentless focus on net zero. It's called the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero for a reason.
So he mentions about the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. That is a WEF initiative that doesn't sustain countries, damages, and further destructs actual environmental movements. This net zero policy is actually damaging to the environment. Because net zero, this carbon capture, and I can't believe we even have to have this conversation as grown adults. Because I remember grade school. I remember we had to plant seeds. We had to plant the, little bean stalks in Dixie cups. I remember those days. People remember a thing called photosynthesis? Oh, yeah. That's when a plant takes carbon out of the air and produces oxygen. Well, if we don't have the carbon, that means the plant's going to die, and that means we don't have oxygen. So how is that sustainable? How is that sustainable? Because I'm using scientific questioning to question the motives of someone like Mark Carney. But hey, it's increased taxes. It's given the billionaires abilities to buy carbon credits. That's why I know these are hypocrites. Because all these billionaires, these guys that care so much about the environment, all they do is buy carbon credits. They're not giving up their private jets. They're not reducing their vacations. They're not switching to electric vehicles. Justin Trudeau, Mr. Green Thumb, rides around in 7 motorcades. Yes, they go to a public event. He needs 7 motorcades. How is that reducing your carbon footprint? How is that beneficial to the environment? But you having to pay extra taxes on heating your home, on gassing your car. You can't have a gas stove. You can't have a gas lawnmower. You have to restrict yourself. We do, but they don't. Because they can buy carbon credits. And then they trust people like Bill Gates to be the expert of this, whose greatest idea is, hey, let's bury all the trees. Let's bury all the trees for the sake of nature. We're going to save nature by killing it. That's how I know all this is crap. That's how I started to realize all this is crap. After COVID, after Russiagate, after everything that's happened in the past how many years, now I find to realize that the environmental policies coming out of these jerks are complete hypocrites, are complete lies, fabricated, gaslit lies. And that's why this guy is the scum of the earth, who just got reined in as your new prime minister.
Because we've moved to the relentless logic of having to get emissions down consistent with the carbon budget. So in that regard, I'm part of that and part of mapping what people want to the mechanisms, particularly in finance, in order to deliver it. I'm also, though, conscious that of 2 other things, Lionel. One is that, of course, net zero it's absolutely essential to stabilize the climate, but that's not the same thing as protecting biodiversity. It's not the same thing as having a just transition along the way. There are lots of other elements that are necessary to this that these broader social movements rightly shine a light on.
And that's why the mechanisms that he's creating is things like a digital currency and digital IDs, and how we need to have mass surveillance, how we need to have these mandates on people. Which, again, nothing to do with biodiversity, nothing to do with nature, but has everything to do with control, which ultimately is the real reason why this is happening. The logic behind this is ways to control people, just like the 15-minute cities. At first, I thought, hey, maybe 15-minute city, you can walk to a near store. Sounds convenient, right? But then you realize convenience comes at a price. Then you realize those 15-minute smart cities are actually more like technocratic prisons, because they're going to mass surveil you. They're going to track your motives. You can't go to certain places. That's the future they want to envision. That's the net zero possibility of someone like Mark Carney. From the people that don't understand a damn thing about the environment. From the people that lecture about the importance of protecting the planet as they're polluting more of the planet. If you're really concerned about cutting emissions, let's start with the military. Let's start with ending wars that cause catastrophic damage to the environment and people. He's not going to do it. None of these people do it. But they're going to demonize farmers. They're going to demonize people like you. They're going to tell you that, hey, you got to suck it up. You got to pay an extra grand to heat your home through carbon taxes, because eventually it's going to make the climate better. The weather's going to be better if you pay more to us. Um, so there you go. That just goes to show you what a scumbag Mark Carney is, and who this guy truly is, and why the mainstream media completely avoids any acknowledgement, any accountability, and they do it intentionally to keep this guy afloat because they want the Liberal Party to succeed. They want the Liberal Party to continue. After all, Justin Trudeau gave them $600 million as a bailout, as a government handout, subsidy for these corporate outlets, for the CBC, for CTV, for Chorus Entertainment, for Rogers Media. They all got this big subsidy. And Justin Trudeau laughed about, ha, well, I bought you, so you can't investigate me. They're doing it intentionally. And now you're seeing why they had to select someone like Mark Carney, because Mark Carney is exactly what the neoliberal globalist agenda that has already eroded Canada wants it to happen. They don't want Pierre Poilievre. They don't want a populist movement. They don't want an actual Canadian nation focused desirably on Canadians. They want a globalized population. They want to diminish national sovereignty. They want to diminish Canadian sovereignty and turn us more into an asset. You know, it's like the Great Reset. You'll own nothing and you'll like it. And Mark Carney is going to be that ushering king that's going to lead us further down that track. Not Donald Trump. Not Donald Trump. Not America. Not Elon Musk. But someone like Mark Carney, who's profiting and capitalizing off of this trade war that's going to hurt and devastate more of this country if it doesn't actually get resolved. If they don't actually nip it on the butt and actually negotiate and actually do something for the good and soul of this country.